Welcome to this week's episode of 0 to a Million, brought to you by Unstack. I'm your host, Zach Rego. Today I'm joined by Gihan Amarasiriwardena, co-founder and president of Ministry of Supply, a work leisure brand that's driving comfort through material science. Gihan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to go through your story. I think I'm a fan of the brand. I've literally stepped foot in the store, felt the shirts, super impressed by them. I think at that first point, you might have only had a button down,
yep,
and maybe a couple of blazers, but the store was minimalist, and but the fit was awesome. The fabric was awesome. So take me through the genesis for building that and taking it to Newbury Street, which in Boston is kind of the shopping street, a high-end shopping street in the city.
Yeah. No, it's been a fun ride. We're nearing 10 years next year of the business. My co-founder and I, we met at MIT, where we were both just super passionate about performance apparel. I was a Boy Scout growing up. I went camping every month, and all through high school, I used to make my own camping gear, like rain jackets, sleeping bags, like taking Tyvek from the dumpsters at home construction sites and laminating that to make waterproof membranes. Making all sorts of gear. I ran cross country and track, so I was really into performance footwear and did a lot of research at the Sports Tech Institute around that. So, this has been long time passion around materials innovation and really applying that to human performance. And there's this kind of realization that in the 2000s in particular, we witnessed this first wave of performance apparel, right? This shift from people wearing cotton running shirts, for example, to Under Armour and Dry Fit, right? And then in the past decade, that kind of extended beyond the gym, right? That was the emergence of of athleisure, right? With brands like Lululemon, for example, and kind of as we were seeing this, it was this question for us of like, why is it that we're still wearing cotton dress shirts and wool suits, for example, that, they wrinkle, you have to dry clean them, they don't stretch, they get super hot, and they're just actually like quite uncomfortable. Right. And we know that the comfort really drives, our confidence, our ability to kind of focus on our work. And, my co-founder was a consultant, and so he had witnessed that firsthand as well. Flying to client sites every week. What we both did is we were Frankensteining our own products. So I was cutting running shirts and making dress shirts out of them, and Aman was making dress socks by cutting the bottoms of Nike Dry Fit socks and sewing them to gold toe dress socks, essentially. So our friends were kind of coding and hacking code, and we were hacking clothes is kind of the phrase. It's
an expensive hobby, just cutting up exactly. Like $12 3 packs of socks on both ends.
Yeah. So it was just something that we saw an opportunity there, especially as people were becoming familiar with performance fabrics. We didn't have to explain it. Yeah. So we launched on Kickstarter back in 2012 with a performance dress shirt. It uses a material that NASA developed for spacesuits called a phase change material. It basically acts as a thermal battery. It absorbs heat when you're too hot, releases it back to you when you're too cold. And it really took off. It was the most funded fashion project on Kickstarter at the time. And It propelled the business forward in terms of proving out that people wanted performance, and beyond the gym, right? And this is kind of before athleisure really took off. I'd say the past decade has been one of focusing on dress shirts and suits. Really like was kind of the core of our business. We launched our men's business, our women's business, and interestingly, coming as we kind of emerged out of the pandemic, what's been it was certainly challenging to sell dress shirts and suits last year, but it proved out that people want comfort when they're working, right? And actually set us up for success on the other side, which is this emerging category of work leisure, which we are really spearheading right now of products that are both comfortable, but they look sharp, they're durable, they're made for an active commute, and responsibly made, right? And so we feel like we're in a position to do that because that juxtaposition of looking presentable but also being comfortable is something that other brands haven't had to tackle head on like we have for the past 10 years. So
So a couple questions on that. I think we'll start with like market research, right? Because you and your co-founder, I think when you're hacking together socks or shirts, right? Like that's different. You didn't have a group of friends that were all like, hey, I need a pair of those, hand stitched socks, right? But I think there is like some level of market research that can be done. I mean, you go to New York City, you see guys biking in suits or, women biking in suits just to commute to work.
Totally.
And in Boston, same thing.
Yep.
I think the airplane is like, it's hell in a suit. And I used to travel like that. And I've totally transformed to travel with suit in arm and I'm wearing something super comfortable, right? So, was that the market? Like, did you guys just say like, hey, we're seeing this everywhere. So we feel like there's a need, whether people know it, we're doing it in our basement or not. Like we think that that's the market research we need to go.
Yeah, I mean, societally, we've been kind of tracking a couple of things. I think there's one, just awareness of performance materials, but there's also our customers self-describe themselves as minimalist nomads and entrepreneurs. We had a customer like you guys speak to us, and I think that was the kind of the insight was almost the antithesis of fast fashion is like fewer better products, but you can't just do that by just saying the product is more expensive and thicker and whatnot, but really making sure that it's versatile to be used in a lot of different scenarios. And then kind of the test that we really like to think of is we call it 1 week, 1 backpack. And it's, can you go in a day pack for a week? And my co-founder and I, whenever we travel, it's always a competition to see who can pack the least. And it's something that's kind of really challenged us to think of like, how can we make our products work in more and more instances? So this kind of nomadic lifestyle. But when I say nomad, I'm thinking, active commuters, thinking of, frequent flyers, people who are on the move and they want to take their best things with them. Right. That's kind of, and the minimalist part is having that kind of fewer better elements. And then entrepreneurs, it's a, whether they're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, but really someone who is, driven, who's got kind of a strong, aspiration career wise, but they're not necessarily held back by what their boss wears, right? Like they're constantly looking, they're hacking their workday and they want to hack their wardrobe as well, right? To be more productive and more comfortable, right? So that's kind of what we've learned. Something that we thought we were the customer. I think that's a common fallacy or challenge, a pitfall that a lot of entrepreneurs have, and we certainly were experiencing that. But I think one of the things that we learned was that actually our customer was a little bit older than we initially thought, and the reason that was the case is because when you're a kind of a mid-career professional, you're probably juggling a lot more in your life, right? Both your family life, you're kind of in the prime of your career, but also people kind of they get to a stage where they really start to think about their health and health can't be passive; it has to be something that's active, right? And so these three things kind of and they've experienced, they've built their own identity, they've experienced kind of a lot of the crappier products out there, and they're willing to invest, and that's what makes that kind of perfect storm for our products.
Totally. Yeah. When you look at Kickstarter, you mentioned that as kind of being a launching point, and obviously, market research is done somewhere on the front end, but that's kind of a proof point. Like, do people want to buy this? They did. Yeah. And at the point, number one funded. How did that kind of get the ball rolling downhill for you all? How did you take it? And I think there's an opportunity to turn it into this huge pop that happens and maybe drag it out a little bit longer. Obviously, it's a little bit of a dip, but how can we turn that into micro content that propels us into the future when we're limited on resources? What was the strategy there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for Kickstarter, it was like a lot of times people think of Kickstarter as a product launch, but there's a tremendous amount of like market iteration that you need to do before then. Before we launched our dress shirt on Kickstarter, we'd actually sold about 1,000 shirts between our dress shirts and base layers that we were selling, and we do them in all these like in-person sales. We were doing trunk shows at like business school cafeterias, for example, and we were getting real-time feedback. And at the same time, we do a batch of 50 to 100 units down in the New York Garment District, for example, and try a bunch of different fabrics, so that when we launched on Kickstarter, we knew the story, right? Because we had told it, hundreds of times before, and we had iterated multiple variants of the product so that we could down select the features. So I think that just going back to the market research part, that like those in-person sales were so critical for us to kind of figure out both the product attributes and the consumer story. When it came to Kickstarter, yeah, it can definitely be a pop, and I think that's something we learned in our first one. We weren't prepared for it. We didn't have the supply chain to produce. We were producing, on a good month, 200, 300 shirts a month, and we had to produce 8,000. After our Kickstarter, so we learned a lot. We had to move our supply chain. And we had to grow fast, and then the same thing is how do you sustain that, right? I think we have found in subsequent Kickstarters, what we've tried to do is really make sure that it is fitting into our cohesive system of products, and that it reinforces a brand narrative, right? Innovation and comfort is something that MOS is founded on. And we went back to Kickstarter 6 years later and launched our Mercury Intelligent Heated Jacket. It's the first wearable heated jacket that has basically think of like a Nest thermostat in it. It's intelligent thermostat, so it basically learns your preferences. How do you run hot? Do you run cold? It also figures out, are you, for example, standing at a cold bus stop? It'll crank the heat up all the way. And if you're running to catch the bus or the train, for example, it'll actually lower that temperature before you overheat. And it's this intelligent heating system, and Kickstarter is perfect for launching there. But it allowed us to drive a lot of press that reinforced our brand narrative, and we were able to promote that on paid social. So I think it's kind of thinking through, how can these campaigns be something that creates a lot of earned media that you can then promote, right? So really trying to figure out novel ways of telling your story. On the other hand, we've done some fun stunts. My wife and I have both run half marathons in our suits for the men's and women's fastest half marathon in a suit. So that's been another one. Yeah.
I love that. Now, I want to talk a little bit, obviously we were talking about it early, and kind of the movement to headless commerce.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you guys have obviously scaled the business, quite well over the last 9.5-ish years, coming up on 10 years. That leads to some changes in the systems and operations and how you manage your website and your go-to-market strategy. What was that decision-making process like, and what systems were you using prior to kind of moving to a headless system?
Yeah, we've gone through a bunch of iterations of our site. It's we were in Shopify in 2011. We shifted to Magento for a little bit, went back to a Shopify theme, and then 2019 we went headless. And I think kind of one of the things our team members just said is you can have a great picture, but the picture frame does a lot of the lift, right? And that's kind of what we've learned with Headless is making sure that it unlocks your ability to do better storytelling, right? And I think that's the lens you really have to think through of whether you want to go headless, because there are certainly trade-offs, I think, in terms of if you're a small team that doesn't have your own internal dev support, that figuring out that balance of what does it unlock your content team to be able to make content on their own, right? Make their own pages, etc., without needing dev support, and making it something that doesn't need a bunch of formatting, etc. So I think that's a huge unlock, right? Is unlocks your content teams. You may not be able to iterate your experience as easily. You can't just go in the liquid like the way you normally would. But those are the trade-offs, right? And fundamentally, for most e-commerce brands, your value proposition isn't a faster checkout, right? It's not a some novel site experience. It's really about communicating the product value. And so if that is what you're selling, if you're maybe a merchant and you're selling a bunch of other products, right, like a wholesaler, then maybe you want to consider being able to iterate your own experience a little bit more. But I think with Headless, the site speed, and then also the ability to really unlock your internal content teams is huge.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, and I don't want to say new term, but it's something that's obviously gaining more traction, and I think starting to go down market from the largest e-commerce sites in the world. And right. that's where it's starting to creep down into stores that are doing 5 million or less in GMV. And that's, headless commerce is basically detaching the front end, what people see on the internet, from kind of the back end management of the rest of the operations of the business. Shopify in its basic form is not headless because the CMS is directly tied to the back end, can slow things down. So just wanted to add that caveat there. Now, Gihan, you mentioned a couple of things there. You mentioned telling a story, right? Like it does become somewhat challenging with a Shopify site to just like insert a new page, insert a new about us, and not either break things or have to hire someone to, hack something together for you. How is your team today managing things like that? You also mentioned having a dev team. Is that something you are managing in-house, or that you found a partner to work with that's outsourced and, you're paying them on a monthly retainer or one-off basis to optimize and build new content?
Yeah. We work with a firm called Studio Rotate. They're in the UK, and they've driven a lot of e-commerce brands, headless sites. A lot of we were drawn to them because they focus again on brands that want to tell a story, and so building mechanics on the user experience that allows us to tell, like, we're a brand that tells fabric innovation narratives over and over again, right? So the unlock for us was to create like a headless structure with PDPs where we could simply upload images and GIFs, for example, and then be able to show that to our customers and spend more time on the assets that we're dropping in, rather than someone have to go into the liquid or HTML. I think that the other thing that I think is really valuable is just like structured data and consistent formatting across that. We used Data CMS, and so it's it's really easy to use for most people. Like, they don't have to have any coding experience, and so I think that helps any creator on our team. Like, we have these like swarming sessions, for example, like new seasons launching, or we have to upload a bunch of new assets to the site. Anyone on the team can jump on and help there. So I think it kind of gives the keys to the castle to more people, but in a sandbox, right? I think it does create a sandbox, and I think if you play within that, you can get a lot done. I've personally learned that as someone who's a tends to lean more of a hacker. Like, I like to, the joke on the team here is that, like, don't give Gihan the keys to the liquid because he'll play around with it. But this one,
I've been there.
but the thing that I've learned is that, like, while you can't customize things the same way, it's totally unlocked content, right? And that's ultimately what's more important. And there will always be some shiny new feature. I think it has been a good way for us to say no to a lot of the Shopify apps that are out there. The app system ecosystem is there's some awesome stuff out there, right? But it's very easy for a site to become a hodgepodge of just a lot of different modules, and so I think it really just kind of keeps your site experience unified. And again, those are trade-offs, right? Those are trade-offs. I think things I will note is, and not say words of caution, but something to think about is, be very judicious on where you want to innovate, on your site experience. Like, because iterating something like a nav, a Shopify theme, for example, like, you can kind of swap that out a little bit easier. It's a little bit more dev work, right? So I think as people build their themes out, like, just figure out what best practices you're trying to break, and be conscious of that, right? Because something's going to look really great in your InVision file, and you're like, oh, this is awesome and clean, right? And then you have it built out and you use it for a month and you get this that's there will be a slower cycle there. But I think if you go into your dev process and your UX design, knowing this explicit areas, you're consciously trying to kind of break, a normal site structure. Ask yourself, like, what is this allowing us to tell a better story? And if that's true, then that's worth going down.
Love it. No, I think your product pages are great. I think that's the place that I kind of was on your site and I really was drawn to. It's not super common theme. The product is showcased very well. Brandon from The Bachelorette is on there. If anyone knows who he is, I just figured that out a little bit ago. Not that I watch The Bachelorette or Bachelor in Paradise, but I do. There's also the pages that I think you guys spend a lot of time on, which is where the storytelling happens, the sustainability, the science, the about. That is so key. And I'm relatively new to e-commerce sites, but what we've found is the folks that are doing really good storytelling and thinking about the persona as a part of their storytelling. Yeah. So, you mentioned it earlier. I might go to market thinking that, persona A is the target customer, but really there's persona B and C who's driving half the business. And how can I create an experience for them that feels unique or customized or really, really personal? And that's something that I think y'all have done a good job of, and that we've been seeing a lot of the brands we're working with, try to figure out how they go to market with it while still using, their Shopify site or whatever it may be. And that's where we hope to fill the gap. So everyone should check out the Ministry of Supply site. Loads super fast, which is, I think, one of the key benefits is that user experience, but also, tells a really nice story. Images are great. The model's famous, so that's pretty cool. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that's pretty awesome. And then, I guess last question for you, future for the brand and its go-to-market strategy. Like, what are you just super excited about over the next 12 months, not only from a brand and product perspective, but hey, we're really pumped to go on TikTok or whatever it may be. Like, I don't know what the next avenue is for you guys, but I'm excited to hear about it.
It's funny. Yeah. So we for a long time, we've had like Google slides of like, here's our 5-year mission and whatnot. And, 2 weeks ago, my co-founder and we were in a room and we were, chatting with Geraldo, who's like our founding partner of brand, was like, hey, why don't we just do this in Datto, right? Why don't we just do it on our Headless site? And so we actually like made a page, which is like our 5-year plan. And the three of us were able to put it up in like an hour, right? And I think, nice. I think, so if you go to ministryofsupply.com/about/5-year plan, the link's there. But basically, that page is like, we're like, how can we tell the story of like, what's our ambitions and vision, right? So again, like, this category of work leisure is just something where it is blowing up right now, and we think we're poised to lead it. That's really something we're conscious of. And the other part is just from a content narrative perspective. Everyone's aware of just kind of the dependency on paid social, in particular, Facebook and Instagram, of diversifying channels, and this realization that we like to think of ourselves as our aspirations are to become like the Dyson of apparel, right? It's really a better user experience driven through innovation and technology, right? And for us, our application's apparel, and what they do really well is they make the technology something that we can all understand, but at the same time, it's like, it's amazing. It's like you're just kind of wowed by the graphics and the experience that they've created. So that's something that we think a lot of the kind of video communications channels are really good for, whether that's TikTok, whether that's stories, or YouTube, for example. We're trying to lean more into those where we can tell that story. And it goes back to Kickstarter, where we started, right? It was Kickstarter was a place where most of the people who land on a Kickstarter video, it was like 60% of it, of the people that came to the page would watch the entire 2-minute video, right? And nowhere have we seen a conversion experience like that. And so we're starting to do more and more video ads, a little bit longer form. We're talking 30 seconds, right? Where you can tell a story. We just kind of started doing that. So that's kind of what's on the docket for us.
I love it. I love the 5-year plan being public on the site. I think, the more I've been doing this, right, I had almost a year of interviewing SaaS and B2B marketers and founders. And now I'm talking to e-commerce founders, and I'm starting to see these like little, like public roadmaps that have been going on for tech companies for years. And you obviously consider yourself a tech company that's using apparel as the avenue. But that's just a public roadmap, right? Like, you're just telling people what your plan is so they can buy in with you, not for today, not for tomorrow, but for the next 5 years. And, I don't know if you took that from a public roadmap somewhere or if someone threw that out as the idea, but like the more and more I talk to folks, I'm starting to see these like, okay, e-commerce founders are adopting some of the stuff that SaaS founders have been doing. And that's amazing to see.
Yeah. I love
it. Gihan, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can everyone connect with you or learn more about the brand?
Yeah. Best place to learn about it is ministryofsupply.com. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Yeah. And check out the YouTube as well. Yeah. There's some great content on there, including an interview from Gihan and the founding team on how they got this thing started. So it's really great stuff.